to listen. Mm.
Hi, Rabbi. Hi,
Is somebody here?
Rabbi's
Hello,
here.
everybody.
Oh, okay. I don't see any. Oh, there's the rabbi. I'm having trouble coming on, so I'm on my phone.
I don't think he hears us.
I hear you.
Yeah, I
I
don't
hear
think
you.
so.
I just wasn't making sure everybody can hear me. Does everybody hear me now?
We
Yes.
can now.
Good, good.
I'm having
All right,
trouble
wonderful.
getting on, so you'll have to excuse me. I'm on my cell. I got you guys, but I don't have it on my computer yet.
All right. At the end of the world. At the end of the world.
Okay.
The okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Welcome everybody. We are this week Parshat Eikev. A very fascinating Torah portion. Really, really a fascinating Torah portion. In that even in the first aliyah of this Torah portion, more than perhaps any other Torah portion, we have Moshe waxing philosophical. He really, in a sense, the philosophy of our relationship with Hashem, not so much the do's and the don'ts that comprise the majority of the Torah. Hashem generally in most of the Torah says, this is what you do, and either obviously we have the stories in the beginning, but once we start getting into the instruction parts of the Torah, most of it is the hard and fast rules. This is what you do, this is what you don't do, these are the rewards and the punishments, etc., all pretty technical, as it were. Then you have Parshat Eikev, and Parshat Eikev, really this whole book of Devarim, Moshe is in a sense discussing behind the scenes of our actions and our motivations. And speaking in a sense to where we've stumbled, why we've stumbled, what our attitude and our approach and perspective has to be, and how we can make sure not to stumble again. Last week's Torah portion was Parshat Ve'et Hanan, in which we said most of the big fundamental ideas of Judaism exist. Right? We have the Ten Commandments. You had the Shema Yisrael. You had such quotes like V'yadata hayom hashevota elavavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim. Right? These are verses Ata hareta ladat ki Hashem Elokim. These verses that are sprinkled, really the powerful verses of Judaism, fundamental verses of Judaism that speak to the whole foundation of our belief system. Most of that could be found in last week's Torah portion. We said, we shared in the past, we'll share again, that Parshat Eikev represents, in a sense, the contrast to Parshat Ve'et Hanan. If Ve'et Hanan are all the big ideas, then Parshat Eikev are the small ideas, and it's right there in the name of the Torah portion. Eikev, in this case, means if, right? V'haya Eikev tishmon, and it'll be if you will listen, right? And it'll be if you will listen. But then the most of the commentaries jump on the fact that it doesn't say the more common word that we use for if, which is
Im.
Okay.
and which is, by the way, and that phrase, and will be if you will listen, with the word im, is a very common and famous, not a common phrase, but a famous phrase that we actually have in the Torah. It does use the more common way of saying it. V'haya im shamoa tishma, right? It's that second, and that second paragraph of the Shema. So we have it where we say it in this more basic sense. So why does the Torah choose to change it into a obscure word, Eikev? Eikev, which never really actually means if. It is more of an anatomical reference.
Right.
Right? Because what does the word Eikev mean?
Heel.
Heel. And it basically means, and it will be on the heels of you listening, then all these things will come. That's how Eikev could mean if, right? On the heels of. On the heels of this, then that, right? So that would basically means if this, then that. So we use this anatomical reference rather than the more simple actual lingual reference of say if, right? And then we highlighted and named the whole parsha. So the commentaries explain that because we're saying what mitzvah should you listen to, not just the big and obvious ones that your pragmatism or whatever says. Oh yeah, you got to listen to you got the big stuff, right? You got to make sure you're going to do all the big stuff right. But Eikev, that you will also do even the stuff Adam dash ba'akevav, that a person would otherwise trample with their heels, right? That there are stuff that are just considered not important. Always comes to mind when reading that commentary is that they once did a social one of these social tests of a society, of the society, and they put a little camera, a hidden camera, and they put on the ground ever-growing denominations of coinage, right? Starting with the penny and a nickel, then a dime, then a quarter, and they were seeing what amount would cause the general an average person to bend down and take of his time to pick it up and put it in his pocket. So they put the penny down, they put the camera, nobody stops for the penny. Not one person stops. Feet go by, everybody go by. The penny sits there and sits there and sits there, and nobody bothers picking it up. The nickel, very few. The dime, a little more. Quarter, pretty much. With kind of a certain common amount of expectation, people were bending down and picking it up. And so there are things that are considered too insignificant to actually take seriously, and most people trample with their heel, which is we're saying that there are the big mitzvahs that everybody would be careful about, and the pasuk, the first pasuk in this parsha, is telling you, "V'haya Eikev tishmon," if you will listen, not just to the big ones, but even the stuff that the general
Rabbi?
populace might trample with their heels. Yes.
I'm reminded of that joke that people always tell about the couple that are having their 60th wedding anniversary, and the wife says, well, we agreed that I would do this. I would be in charge of the small things and he would be in charge of the big things, and we never found a big thing.
Right. Exactly. Right. I would right that says the husband turns and says, but 60 years later, there still hasn't been a big thing yet.
There hasn't been a big
Right.
thing, right?
Right. Another version of that is that the wife says, "Look," to the husband, smart the woman says, "Look, you're the big thinker among us. You're." I mean, yeah, I'm not such a big thinker. So here in our marriage, here's what you're gonna do. He says, "You're gonna be worried about who should be president and what the United States should do vis-a-vis Russia." And all that, you'll be busy with that stuff. That's the big stuff. I'll let you worry about that. Just take care of our bank account and
The kids.
the home decision, the kids, and et cetera, et cetera. You stick with the big thing. You're the big thinker. Anyways, so there are the things, and the parsha is trying to tell us an important truism. And when it comes to the Torah, the big things are the small things is about perception. But essentially there is no such thing as a big thing or a small thing. If Hashem has commanded, it's not a small thing. It's not something to trample on. That's a perception, and it's a mistaken perception. The Eikev Tishmonon will be that you will listen to all of it, whether it's the big things or the stuff that the average person tramples with their heels. And in fact, that's another reference to the heel, because oftentimes the heel itself, right, this part of the body that is definitely relatively ignominious, right? You want to call somebody the head? Oh yeah, sure, I'm the head, right? And in English, you call somebody a heel, right? Not a very not a complimentary reference, right? And yet the heel is an incredibly vital part of the body. Fascinatingly, whenever you arrive, say in a new location, when Neil Armstrong or whatever it is lands on the moon, which is the first part of him that touches down on the moon?
Right.
Foot.
When you walk into a room, what is the first part of you that touches down in that new space? Your heel. That's just the way you walk. You walk. Your heel is the part that comes down first. And in fact, it's callousness and its insensitivity, which is why we say a heel as a negative connotation. But it's actually that robustness that allows it to be that pioneer, as it were, first into the breach, because it can handle a lot, right? That toughness that the heel has is what allows it to be the first thing that ventures forward, right? Kind of you don't test the heat of the water in a bathtub or whatever it is, or the coldness of the water in the swimming pool by sticking your head in first, right?
Where you put your
You
toe.
usually your toe or but your foot, right? Your foot, yes, your toe, because your toe, you need a certain amount of sensitivity. The heel would actually be the first one, except that's a little bit of an awkward bend to try and bend. Most times, at that point, if you're trying to stick your heel in, you're going in after, right? Your tongue. But and also the other issue with the heel is that the heel is not sensitive enough. It's hard to taste to detect the temperature, find the have a fine detection of the temperature with your heel. Your heel doesn't have that much sensitivity. All this to say that there's a way of looking at the heel in a negative fashion. It's insensitive, it's low, it's the bottom of your foot, etc., etc. Or to understand that that actually,
Yeah,
in
right
certain
now.
circumstances, is incredibly vital and important.
Yeah, it is.
Diane, we hear
All right,
you.
I'm calling you. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. That was Adrian. I told her to get on with us.
All right.
Sorry.
Either way, so the point being that this is true about every mitzvah, and really is the truth about every thing in God's existence. Right? Of a general rule that that God does not create scraps, and everything has a role to play, and a significant role to play. In whatever way. And in certain cases, it seems to be that it's a very lowly thing and a thing that is meant to be brushed aside, right? Until we find its great purpose, right? The famous story about Shlomo Melech and the spider, right? That he saw a spider, or David Melech, rather, King David and the spider. And he saw a spider, and he saw that a spider makes its living by sucking the blood of the poor insects trapped in its web. And he looks and he says, "What value does a spider have? Its entire existence is sucking the blood of something else." And in a sense, King David, who's connected to God and to reality deeper than the average person, he sits there and he puts out there into like the metaphysical space that he does not comprehend. He devalues the spider. To which the spider responds, it says, "How dare you? I am God's creation. God created me, and He created me perfectly for what I am meant to be meant to do, etc., etc. And there will be a time, David Melech, where you will come to appreciate my existence." Fast forward a couple of years, David Hamelech is running from King Shaul, right, from Saul, and he is. Uh, I'm sorry, I've just put everybody mute to just limit the in the sense of background noise. By all means, please, everybody unmute themselves whenever they want to ask a question, etc. But the Shlomo David HaMelech is running from King Shaul from King Saul. He's running through the wilderness of Ein Gedi. If you ever go there, you can see it's how it might be a place where one can hide. Either way, he runs into a cave with Saul's troops hot on his heels. And this is just a minor reprieve because they will just, at their leisure, check each one of the cave until they'll find his. And there's no escape. There's only one way into the cave. He runs out the mouth of the cave, they catch him. He stays in the cave, they'll eventually catch him. And he doesn't know. He says this is really the end of the line for him, as it were. Then the spider comes over and says, "Hey, remember once upon a time? You besmirched our character. You said we have no value. Well, we told you you're going to need us one day." And a group of spiders start spinning webs at the mouth of the cave. By the time Shaul's troops come by to this cave, they take a look and they see the mouth of the cave is covered entirely with spider webs. They say, "Oh, okay, nobody could have gone here. This is undisturbed." And so they said, "Move along, move along." And so the spider turns back to David HaMelech and says, "See, uh, uh, you you defamed not only spiders but our webs specifically as the way we travel. It's the web that saved your life here. So and not to say that the point of spider webs is to save kings' lives as they are running from their jealous predecessors. That's not the point of spider web. But it's making a very important point that just because in your perception in this immediate moment, in the context that you have, you cannot see the value of something, does not mean, God forbid, that it doesn't have a value. And if this is true about things in the world, how much more so when it comes to Torah mitzvot? And not just because God commanded them, but because of the relationship that you're building with God. And this is, in a sense, Moshe Rabbeinu's point.
Rabbi,
And as
may I
we,
ask a question?
sure.
If every creation has a purpose, then why did Hashem create if we were going to destroy it anyway?
Create the city of
Yeah.
And among many other places that we
Absolutely.
and the answer is just because a place has its end, right, doesn't mean we all have our end, right? We all pass. Doesn't mean that there wasn't a purpose that we were serving while we were around. Things there are creatures that live and die within the space of a day. I lasted for a lot longer than that, right? And even that creature that exists for the space of a day, there's something that it is part of an integral part of the process that needed to be there, right? And so too with I. At this point, I, in its role as a city or whatever it is no longer part of Hashem's plan. Does it mean that it wasn't originally? Does it mean that in the time that it was? First of all, they came into the city of I, the houses and the homes and whatever it is, and they were able to use that. I mean, even just in a practical sense, I'm not, God forbid, saying that the entire purpose of the people there were just to build the houses for the Jews to move into. But when and where, as it says, there is no thing that doesn't have its place, and there is nothing that doesn't have its time. It doesn't mean that that time lasts forever, right? And I think time is very relative, right? We think like, okay, so the Roman Empire, they weren't like the city of Ai; they lasted for thousands and thousands of years. Well, first of all, we don't know how long the city of Ai lasted. Could have also lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the Roman Empire, now it's gone; it's totally eradicated. But it's left its impact. And to God, is there really a difference between 1,000 years versus 100 years versus one day? In other words, the value is not necessarily measured by how long it's been around, but it could achieve its purpose, and then its purpose might be done, or its purpose might be something else, and perhaps its purpose is as a test to the Jewish people. If it wasn't for the city of Ai, we wouldn't have the prayer of Aleinu. And the
And that's where I was going with this. That's exactly where I was hoping you would go with this. Okay.
Right. Now I'm gonna say I want to be careful with that. Again, I don't want to say that the entire purpose of a city and the annihilation of all of it is just to give us a prayer. I'm not in that position. This is all part of like what we call a theodicy, right? To look at cataclysmic events and to ascribe your own religious meanings and reasonings for this, divine reasonings for this, like what people did with the Holocaust, et cetera, et cetera. Not my place. Not my place. I just take the information that is provided, and I run with it to try and understand and explain it. I'm very careful to generally not venture into my own hypotheses about things that are way beyond my pay grade, including with the city of Ai. What is the purpose? What is the existential purpose of that city? But again, can you say that is it definitely fair to say, let's, from one perspective, it doesn't seem to have a purpose. Well, I could find a whole bunch of smaller purposes, not saying that any one of them is the purpose of its existence. Maybe the purpose of its existence is not one singular kind of edifying purpose, and it could be a collection of a whole bunch of things that it accomplished, including being the reason that we have a link, right? And Enkolokeno. For all those that are wondering, that asterisk, we'll come back after the class and we can explain what that means. Why this city is how we have the prayer of Aleinu. And that was because it was graffitied on the walls. Joshua read it and said, "Great, I love this prayer." No, that's not the reason. Anyways, but back to this idea
Yeah,
Um, um, if everything in God's world has purpose, how much more so when it is about a specific directive we have from God, whether it makes sense to us or not, and that's key, because oftentimes we measure the value of something by how much the value is apparent to us in our own eyes. How valuable this particular mitzvah. Oh, this mitzvah is beautiful. It's meaningful. It's in line with the zeitgeist or whatever it is, and therefore I raise its estimation, and therefore this becomes an important mitzvah. And this mitzvah I will put my heel to, because either I consider it insignificant, or I actually have a problem with it, an issue with it, and because I measure everything by myself, including my devotion to God, which is problematic. If you think about it, that's by definition oxymoronic. You should not measure any devotion you have to anything by your own sensibilities, because then, to a certain degree, it's not a devotion to anything but you. Your devotion is to yourself, not to, and devotion connotes that you're giving of yourself to something else, and not, in a sense, giving of yourself to yourself by way of this thing. And that's very important to really appreciate in this. Eikev Tishmun, this is a relationship you're having with God, and when there's a relationship, there is no such thing as I'm sorry, let me just tell this person that I'm right in the middle of a class, or else they'll keep on calling. In middle of a class, Kama will call you back afterwards. So that is so as we said, that a relationship, you don't get to measure, as it were, the big things or the small things. A relationship is by definition inherently subjective. It's an important point to mention. Whenever I do couples counseling, I say let's start with a certain ground rule realization, as it were. Let me make you clear of something. The two of you are not here to be objectively right. You're going to lay out your position, you're going to lay out your position, and both of you are going to treat this like a court of law. And in the court of law, you're trying to convince the judge you're objectively right, or the jury, or some disinterested party about your correctness, right? And they're kind of measuring objectively, this from a purely agnostic perspective, you're right or you're right, etc., etc. You win the day, and the other one therefore has to conform to this. No, that works in society, that works in law, that does not work in a relationship. Because a relationship is an entire world unto itself, and there's two primary factors in a relationship: you and you. Which means my position, in my opinion, whatever it is, really doesn't matter. Neither does anybody outside of this world of this relationship. The only two people that really matter in this relationship are the two of you. A relationship is a world of entire subjectivity. And if it's important to you, then it is important. End of conversation. And if it's important to you, then it is important. 50% of the reality here considers this important. 50% of the reality considers that important. So don't convince me this. I am not a judge. I'm more just the umpire. The rules of the game are defined by you, by the two people here. If this is something that is important to you, then it is important. And the other side needs to know that and needs to deal with that information. And they can't disregard it and say, well, but it's objectively not important. No, but in this relationship, the 50% of this relationship considers this very important. And if the goal here is to have a healthy relationship, then that must absolutely be considered. That must absolutely be considered. You cannot disregard it on the basis of the fact that many other people would agree with you that this is not important. The only person whose opinion matters here in this situation, other than yours, is that person. Is this person, and this person is telling you that it is important. So it is important. That is true about every relationship. It's very good, by the way, very good and healthy marital advice or relationship advice. You do not measure the value of the opinion or the desires or the weight of their perspective based on anybody else outside of the relationship. You may weigh it between the two of you. If this is important to this person and you can come on board, wonderful. If you can't come on board, then the two of you now know that there's something important that this person wants, needs, desires, or whatever it is, and that and the other person says they can't, and you work with those factors. It doesn't mean that everybody has to give in immediately to everything that the other side has to say. But you're operating in a different on a different playing field and by a different set of rules in a relationship than you are in a let's say in a business or in a working environment, etc. In those kind of situations, if it's then you find out what is objectively important, what's objectively less important, and you work to satisfy those things which are important, and those things that are less important. In fact, a very successful business, a very successful manager of anything, has a particular skill of identifying what is the important things, identifying those things that are not important, putting focus and attention on the important things and less attention on the unimportant things. And that is going to be a successful businessman, and that's going to be a successful business. Right? If you're trying to run a Fortune 500 company, as the CEO, you cannot be concerned about what color the door handles are in the bathrooms on the third floor. You can't be obsessed about that. You've got bigger things on your plate, bigger concerns, and understanding what is important and what is not important, and putting focus on what is important and putting focus on and not putting that much focus on the other stuff. That is somebody who's going to be successful. And if the relationship with God was that, then in fact that's the way you would do it. You would make sure you got the big important stuff in place, and if you're not very sure about Chalav Yisrael or whatever it is, or the little nitty gritty stuff, who cares? Or if I miss a few words out of the davening, who cares? Well, we do not approach Judaism from a reward and punishment and therefore kind of a business approach. You're right, by the way. If you're approaching Judaism as a reward and punishment, yeah, do the big stuff. Make sure you got that covered. The small stuff is small, and you're fine. But that's not the relationship you have with Judaism, because that's not the with God, because that's not the relationship you have with a beloved person. You don't sit there and say, "Okay, you know what? I know it's a pet peeve of theirs that I leave the toothpaste cap off the toothpaste, all right, or the toilet seat up, or or this particular light on in the bedroom while they're trying to go, whatever it is. All this is small stuff. Look, I remember every anniversary, and I make sure there's roof over the head. So I do all the big stuff." Get off my back. And again, objectively, you're probably right. But a relationship doesn't work that way. If you are devoted to your beloved, then if they articulated to you that the toothpaste cap is something that's just a pet peeve of theirs, or the toilet seat, or whatever it is, then you want to do that. That becomes important to you because it's important to them. There is no such small thing. There is no definition of a small thing. Why is this a small thing? This person who I really love, desire, and I'm devoted to says this bothers them. That's important to me.
That's a lovely message for Tu B'Av. Thank you. I love it.
Yeah, right. And on the heels of Tu B'Av, and in a sense, on the heels of our failures of Tisha B'Av.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but you need to mention that on Saturday so more people can hear that.
All right. We'll bring it up now. Let's take this further. There's another quote in this parsha that is brought into, and because we already invoked both sides of this conversation. One side of the conversation is God. Not surprising, we invoked him. It's kind of we mention his name every once in a while in this parsha class. But the other side of the conversation is David HaMelech, who we've already. So it's a very fascinating conversation. The Midrash lays out between David HaMelech and God. In a well-known chapter of Psalms, the David Hashem Ori, it's a chapter that we will start reciting in less than a month from now, in less than half a month now from now, actually, from the beginning of the month of Elul, right, the final month before Rosh Hashanah, puts us in the right mindset for the high holidays. There's a quote in this chapter that is also very, very well known. Achat sho'alti me'et Hashem ota avakesh. There's one thing I ask of you, O God, right? This is a king, right? A king of all of Israel, right? A successful king, a king that is beloved by the people. He's a successful warrior. He's got a lot going on for him. King David has got a lot going on for him. And he turns around and he says, God, I only really want one thing. Achat sho'alti ota avakesh. Okay, God says, okay, if it's only one thing, tell me. Let me hear. Okay. And so David Melech goes, okay, here's my one thing. Shifti b'veit Hashem kol yimei chaya, lachzos b'nei Hashem, l'vakir b'cholon. God's like, whoa. I want to dwell in the house of God all the days of my life. I want to gaze upon His glory and God says, whoa, you just listed. You said you're coming with one. Says, this is why Jews get a bad name. God says, He says, yeah, right. You say you're coming with one thing, and then you have a bait and switch, right? Obviously, not. God's not anti-Semitic, but either way, the point is, David HaMelech comes with one. It says, "Achat sho'alti," right? I'm only going to ask for one thing, and then he literally gives a list, right? He gives a list. So, God turns to David HaMelech and says, "Explain yourself, sir." To which, what does David HaMelech respond? David HaMelech responds, Mimcha lamadati. God, I learned that move from you. Mimcha lamadati. I learned that from you. God says, really? Where? Parshat Eikev, David HaMelech says. Parshat Eikev, beginning of the 5th Aliyah. V'ata Yisrael, and now, O Israel, ma Hashem shoel mimach. What's it that God's really asking of you? Right? Right? Well, here's a simple request from God. Ready? Okay, you ready? Small little request that God has. What's God really asking you? Otherwise, that you should fear God. You should go in His way. You should love Him with all your heart and all your soul, and do every single one of His mitzvahs. The chukim and the mishpah. Boom! Right? So David HaMelech turns to God and says, "If you could do it, I can do it." Right? Right? You come. With the thing saying, "Ma, what is it already? Hashem, show me what that God's already asking of you, other than to fear Him, to devote your life to Him, to do every single thing He said, to love Him with all your heart and all your soul." And so, God, if you can do it, I can do it. Right? Okay, that's an interesting tit for tat. You know, David HaMelech, you were pretty sharp. You know, you were on the ball there. Good. So in the rhetorical argument, you probably, you made your point, But David HaMelech, you really didn't answer God's question, because God also, the question's on you. So you both have the same problem to the same question, which neither of you answer. How is it? Because David HaMelech, did you explain how you asked for one and then listed a whole bunch? All you said is that God is guilty of the same crime. So what is the explanation for either or both of them? And the answer is you have to reframe, and this is a beautiful explanation from Chassidus. You have to reframe what David HaMelech is asking, what Hashem is then responding, and then what David HaMelech is citing for his rebuttal, as it were. It does not say davar achat sha'alti or bakasha achat sha'alti. It doesn't say I'm asking for one thing.
That's technical.
Right.
What?
That's technical.
No. One second, Paula. I didn't finish my point. I didn't say that he's pulling a technicality. No. I'm saying something very different. He doesn't say I have one request or I have one thing that I'm asking. He's saying I am asking for one. I'm asking for oneness. Achat is what sho'alti.
Yeah.
I am asking to be one with you, God. What does that mean? That means Shifti b'veit Hashem kol yemei chayei lachzot b'noam Hashem u'levake beichalo. I am asking God, I want to be one with you. I don't want to be in my palace. I want to be in your palace.
Mm.
I don't want to gaze on my splendor. I want to gaze on your splendor.
How do other people other than Hasidim explain this?
So they say there was that tit for tat. When David HaMelech is saying, "Yeah, sure, I'm coming in with one, but I really got a whole bunch of lists, and if you
Just
can do
like
it, I
you.
can do it."
I see.
Yeah.
But
But
Hasidus,
here is something
yeah,
far deeper and more profound. So this is what he's
Wow.
asking for. He says, God, achat sho'alti. I want, in other words, what David HaMelech is saying, God, I want to be in a relationship with you. I want to be one with you. I want to be unified with you. To which Hashem is saying, how do you know you can do that? By what metric do you think that it is possible for a human being to be one with the divine? And he's not saying it antagonistically or confrontationally. God is asking. That's a hefty thing you're asking for. How do you know that it could be done? To which David HaMelech answers, Mimcha lamadati. I know it could be done because that's what you taught me. From you I've learned. Where? When
Okay.
you yourself say that this is what not only what I want, but what I expect from the Jewish people to have that relationship. When you in Parshat Eikev say, turn to the Jewish people and say, Jewish people, I don't want a master-servant relationship.
Mm.
I want a relationship.
Wow.
Va'ata Yisrael, and now Israel, ma, which means that ma means like nothing. None is shoam imach, right? Who said once upon a time about themselves, v'nachnu ma? Moshe and Aaron, who had achieved the status of truly being in a seamless relationship where they do not stand alone. I am nothing without God, right? That's what they're saying. We are not. We didn't make the choices. When Korach comes and says, "Why did you make yourselves leaders and the big bosses?" What does Moshe and Aaron say? V'nachnu ma. What are we? We didn't make anything of ourselves. We just do what Hashem is asking of us. We are in that kind of relationship. We are totally nullified in our relationship to Hashem. And now comes Hashem and says, "V'ata Yisrael, ma Hashem." I am asking that ma from all of you to be in a seamless relationship with Hashem. That when a person looks at you, they are not seeing an independent being. They are seeing a being that is in total synchronicity with the divine. So you're saying to me, the David HaMelech says, Hashem, you're asking me how could it be done? You give me the blueprint. Not only you giving me the blueprint, but you've told me that that's expected. At which point God says, exactly. We, the Jewish people, now, here's the thing. We're not all going to perfect it. Maybe somebody on the level or caliber of David HaMelech after many years perfected it, and Moshe Rabbeinu perfected it. But to know that that is the track we're on, that is the goal, that is what we're reaching for. Nobody is going to say their marriage is perfect. But the envisioning that perfection is what gives us our in a sense, our guiding, our North Star. What am I trying every day to be better at? Am I trying to be the best pragmatic, the biggest pragmatist about my relationship with God? Make sure to do the big things, whatever it is. Finagle a little bit of godliness and alongside the schedule God into my day and whatever it is. I'll be very pragmatic about this whole thing. No, devotion as a relationship. Love God with all your heart and all your soul. Which means then you'll do every single one of those mitzvot. Not because you're obligated to, not because you're calculating the reward or the punishment about them, because the one that you love with all your heart and soul asks you to do it. So there's no small, there's no big. It's what my beloved asked of me. this, as we're about to coronate God as King, we're heading towards Rosh Hashanah, we're coronating God as King. Hashem wants to remind us of the way of the relationship, the way He really wants it to be. It should be a relationship that is not approached as, okay, there's the big boss in heaven. We need to make sure we stay on his good side. And so here's the stuff you got to do. And I would say, and I'm going to turn to you as a good strategy and tell you, prioritize this, 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 and this, because, that's the big stuff. That's the stuff he's really paying attention to. You can kind of get away with the small stuff if you make sure you take care of the big stuff. The rewards then will outweigh the punishments, and your ledger, you'll be in the black on your ledger rather than in the red. That's not our approach, our strategy to Rosh Hashanah. Our strategy is that we are recommitting to a relationship with Hashem. And this relationship means that I don't apply my pragmatic, logical perspective where I start weighing and calculating and measuring. Rather, everything that you put forward to me is important, and that is, in a sense, the litmus test. How do I know if I'm kind of doing this right? If the stuff that most other people that are kind of approaching this pragmatically are kind of trampling all over, they just don't, they're aware of it, right? They see the penny. They just say, it's not worth my time and effort to bend down and pick it up. I've made a calculated decision about this. And if you approach it where I'm not making a calculated decision, if my beloved asked it of me, then the answer is yes. Now, sometimes I'll mess up. I'm not going to be perfect. But I'm not sitting there and saying, let me decide if this is worth doing or not. Let me decide if this is worth my time, attention, and focus. Let me be calculated about this. That means that you're not viewing this engagement you have with God as a relationship. And that's what we have to be working on. Eikev Tishmun, that little stuff, the stuff that everybody else is traveling. What's your approach to that? Are you bending down and picking it up? Are you trying? Are you trying? Now, again, we're not going to be perfect in it. And there's going to be other things that overwhelm at times, et cetera, et cetera. And we might not ever really master this. We might not ever master this. But we're trying. But if you're trying and you have your focus in the right place, then that's already a good place to be.
Yesterday, Howie and I were having a discussion about which bracha do you say? Like if you've got a cholent, which bracha do you say over the cholent? And we're talking. Finally, he said to me, why does it matter which bracha you say for which thing? Isn't it a little unnecessary? And I said, one thing that this does is it gives us mindfulness of everything that we put in our mouth. And that brings us closer to God. And when you just said the word focus, I think this is the link to get to that focus.
So it's actually interesting. So you're saying, in a sense, so a bracha is, as you said, and I think this is true about all, because we were talking about earlier, that to a certain degree there is a value to every single mitzvah, even if you come at it from a pragmatic perspective. You say, I can't see it right now. It doesn't mean that just because you can't see it doesn't mean that there isn't. And always, even from a pragmatic perspective, do this mitzvah because you never know the value of it later, or maybe you don't, or maybe the value is immediate and you just are not appreciating it, but like a vitamin, right? The kid doesn't understand why they take the vitamin, right? But either way, but the point is, so right there you're articulating even a pragmatic value of a bracha. In that, it actually brings you a focus, not only to the thing you're putting in your mouth, but also to the relationship you have with Hashem, which itself turned that around and says that as I cultivate that relationship, I'm looking to get the relationship with a point where, yes, the bracha definitely has this kind of reasoning behind it and has that kind of value. But even if it didn't, and even if I don't know the value, simply if the fact is that Hashem has asked me to do it, then I'm looking forward to doing it. And I relish the opportunity to get even into the nitty gritty, right? If I know my spouse has a love for, let's say, sunflowers, right? Right? And they're a weed, right? Practically whatever it is. And I get into a whole thing, this is right, whatever. And there's no, or something else, that there's no valid reason to have. But if it happens to be that my beloved loves them, then I'm going to, research the heck out of them and get the very best one I can, right? Or whatever it is. You do things for the one you love, whether it makes sense or not, makes sense to you or not. Now, with Hashem, you know that everything does make sense. And if it doesn't seem to make sense, that's a lack in you. But moving the relationship to the point whether it makes sense to me or not. And not just because I'm being obedient to the big power in heaven, but because my beloved wants it. That's all I need to hear. My beloved wants it, then I'm really interested in doing it exactly right. Right? Exactly down to the smallest shade of color, whatever it is, right? Because I have to, because it makes practical sense. Oh, it's probably a little crazy. That's fine. I've been called worse, right? And that's what you see with from Jews, right? Hashem says, "Take me a nice fruit," right? Etrog, right? Do you really think that this person's going to earn a bigger portion in the world to come because their etrog is this shade of yellow versus this shade of yellow? Why in the world? Is there any practical reason why you're spending that much time on the etrog and making no
Let alone
practical
that much money. They're very expensive.
and including spending all that much money? But when my beloved says, "Get me a nice one," I'm going to work my darndest to get the nicest I can. Because we're in a relationship. How many other religions allow for that? To be literally in a relationship with God. Again, not a business relationship, not even a parent-child relationship. But what we're talking about, as Shir Hashem puts out, a beloved. My beloved asked me to get him a nice fruit. I'm going to get the nicest I can. There is some indication that when it comes to kosher or brachas or whatever it is, I can do this even a little bit better, even a little bit more, a little bit more. That's not a burden. I relish the opportunity to show my devotion, my love. My wife's, when we were married for 2 months, so in that honeymoon phase, as it were. So our 2nd-month anniversary. That's my point. I was at a point where nobody else. At a certain point, it was a 2nd-month anniversary. It's like, oh, Rabbi, you're so quaint. Yeah, look, when your marriage is all of 2 months old, then the 2-month anniversary is a significant day, right?
Absolutely.
We were in Chicago by her sister. I went to Jewel Osco, which is like their local giant over there, and I bought 60 roses. I brought them home. Was that too much? Absolutely, it was too much. There was nothing we were going to do. We were leaving. We left Chicago the next day. The roses stayed in Chicago.
That's a good story.
And my sister-in-law never lets me forget that I just like invaded her house with 60 roses and then just left them. And she had like every vase or whatever filled with roses, and she just was it embellishment? Was it an exaggeration? Of course. In general, you have a hard case to make for the practicality of flowers. But that's not what life's about. We're not robots. There is something deeper than our logic machine. Something more powerful than our logic machine. and our relationship with God taps into that. And therefore, even the stuff that doesn't seem to make sense, or objectively is so insignificant that everybody else is going to trod that with their heels. But right there might just in fact be the litmus test. Is your approach to Yiddishkeit methodical, logical, calculated, businesslike? Or is your approach to Yiddishkeit passionate, devoted, full of love and awe, willing to go and relish going the extra mile? Right, everybody?
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Please post this fast.
You have someone to give it to?
Yeah.
All right. Will do.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Shalom. Thank you so
you.
much.
it's a good remembrance to remember that, it's
Yes.
good to have it repeated. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
Rabbi.
Good Shabbos, everyone.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Saturday.